Do you really know what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah, or is the true account of these places still a mystery? The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is one of the most famous tales in the Bible, but what we've been taught is nothing more than a reduced and distorted version, flavored by various interpretations over time. In today's video, we're going to open the curtains and illuminate the secrets surrounding the ruin of these cities, exploring the details that many prefer to leave in the dark. Is the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah really limited to homosexuality, as many claim, or is there a much richer plot, full of lessons that can make us rethink our view of society and human values? Get ready for an unexpected journey through the pages of history, where secrets in disguise are waiting to be revealed and, of course, what the Bible really has to say. Let's explore the saga of Sodom and Gomorrah together, a narrative that promises to leave many open-mouthed, full of details that have gone unnoticed by the most attentive. Before we dive into this mystery that has intrigued generations around the globe, we need to place this story in the historical and geographical context of its time. These two cities were not just dots on the map. They were established in the vibrant southeastern region of Canaan, close to the Dead Sea, an area that today stands out for its dryness and challenging geography, but which in those days, Sodom and Gomorrah were the beating heart of a vital trade that connected Egypt to Mesopotamia, boasting an economic importance worthy of a veritable red carpet. The area was a veritable natural treasure chest, full of nutritious soil and verdant fields, like an endless feast for the eyes and stomach. However, this success was not a mirror of social harmony or ethics. The cities fell prey to a distorted morality that turned its back on the pillars of justice and welcome that were essential to the existence of ancient civilizations. Sodom and Gomorrah were famous for their extravagance, but it wasn't just about what you could touch or see. The Bible paints Sodom and Gomorrah as a place of turmoil where violence and a lack of empathy reigned supreme. It was a land that turned its back on the helpless, such as strangers and the needy. The real calamity of these cities was not just their wealth, but the moral derangement that permeated their streets, a place that exchanged fundamental values for a feast of ephemeral pleasures and a selfishness that made merry. Traditional storytelling, especially that shaped by centuries of religious views, indicates that urban centers were razed to the ground mainly because of their amorous transgressions, particularly with regard to homosexuality. According to this story, the transgression of the cities was so serious that God sent angels as messengers to warn Lot, a good man who lived in Sodom, before the flames and brimstone consumed everything. The fact that the inhabitants tried to take advantage of the divine visitors is seen as a mirror of non-standard sexual practices, leading many to conjecture that the main sin of Sodom and Gomorrah had to do with homosexuality. This version, widely spread by preachers and scholars throughout history, has been used as a justification for condemning sexual practices that don't fit the traditional norms of many religions. The sin of the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah is not limited to a sexual issue. The Bible, however, never makes a direct statement about homosexuality being the specific sin that led to the destruction. In fact, what the story describes is a series of social and spiritual failings that went beyond a single act: a lack of hospitality, contempt for foreigners. Violence and the oppression of the poor are recurring themes in the biblical account, but they are often overshadowed by the emphasis on sexuality. To understand the true meaning behind the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, it is necessary to go beyond the traditional view and explore the various layers of sin and decadence present in that society. And to do this we need to look deeper, they say, and at the issues that were important at the time. When we delve deeper into the Bible, we find a very different description from that popular simplification of the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah in Genesis 18 to 19. The story tells much more about the moral and social corruption of the cities than about a single act of immorality. The word sin that appears in these texts does not refer exclusively to sexuality, but to a series of practices that involve injustice, cruelty, and disrespect for the most vulnerable. Contrary to popular belief, the original text of Genesis does not focus on homosexuality as the central sin of Sodom, but on violence and oppression. One of the key verses that reflects this is Genesis 18:20-21, where God says that the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is immense and that their sin is very grave. Rather than a reference to a specific sexual transgression, the seriousness of Sodom and Gomorrah's sin is related to the brutal behavior of society, especially towards the weakest and most unprotected. The residents' first reaction is to rape the visitors, which demonstrates a deep contempt for hospitality, which was one of the fundamental values of ancient culture. The men's attempt to abuse the visitors was not simply a sexual issue, but a clear demonstration of violence. The practices are not just an affront to individual morality, but to a social system that failed to protect the most vulnerable, such as foreigners, the weak and the poor. The real failure of Sodom and Gomorrah lies in the deterioration of an entire society that has turned its back on the essential foundations of justice, warm welcome, and consideration for one's neighbor. When we look at these flaws in the system, we realize that the ruin of the cities was not a simple reprisal for an isolated slip-up, but the result of an entire society that rode roughshod over the rights of others, driven by selfishness and tyranny. In order to grasp the importance of Lot in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, it is essential to observe how he relates to the angels that God dispatched. Lot, Abraham's relative, emerges as an example of righteousness in the midst of chaos and moral rot. When the angels make their triumphal entry into Sodom, Lot welcomes them with open arms, as if they were old friends, preparing a feast fit for kings. Meanwhile, the townspeople, with their evil intentions, only see the newcomers as easy prey, ready to turn what could be friendship into abuse. The difference between Lot and the citizens of Sodom is one of the first glimpses of this narrative. The warm welcome and the safeguarding of crucial values, so delicate in Old Testament culture, are presented as the opposite of the brutality and contempt that permeate the citizens of the city. Not only does Lot welcome the angels into his home, but he also puts his own skin on the line to ensure their safety, even in the face of an army of choleric people. This act is undoubtedly hair-raising, but it needs to be understood in the light of the cultural setting of the period. For the people of those parts, respect for home and safeguarding visitors were worth more than anything else in the world. Although Lot's proposal seems like an enigma in today's standards, it reveals his quest to maintain the values of welcome and security in a place where these principles were evaporating like mist in the sun. In turn, Lot's saga reveals the ethical short-sightedness of a society that, as the years go by, has forgotten how to differentiate between right and wrong. Lot's stubbornness in protecting the angels, choosing not to surrender to the whims of the mob, reveals a lonely struggle against the ethical rot of Sodom. The fact that he was the only one in his city to take this action highlights how deep society had sunk into moral filth. While Lot guards the divine travelers, the rest of the city indulges in a carnival of senselessness and selfishness. God, through his messengers, offers Lot and his family a lifeline. This escape is like a cry for freedom from the moral collapse of a people. They are warned not to turn their heads to the past, as if time itself were pulling them back. However, Lot's wife, in defiance of the warning, turns round and ends up becoming a salt sculpture, a true masterpiece of disobedience. Lot's companion's farewell illustrates that true freedom is not restricted to the body, but also embraces the soul, when we are able to leave behind the slights of a ruined past. Thus, Lot's escape becomes a beacon of hope in the midst of the mess, illustrating that even in the shabbiest communities there is an opportunity for salvation for those who act justly. Changing from within isn't a walk in the park. It's often like fighting an epic battle with yourself, where the temptation to hold on to bad things plays the villain. The collapse of Sodom and Gomorrah is one of the most intense and striking chapters in the Bible, made up of fire and drama that leaves anyone open-mouthed. In the biblical narrative, the scene is breathtaking. The Almighty sends flames and smoke from heaven, devouring the cities and all their belongings as if they were pieces of paper in a summer fire. This swift and devastating demolition may at first appear to be a direct and ferocious punishment for mischief. However, if you focus your magnifying glass on the story, you realize that the ruin of Sodom and Gomorrah holds much richer meanings, both as a relic of the past and as an allegory of life. It becomes an emblem of a society that, by distancing itself from the fundamental rules of justice, balance, and acceptance, has become a boat adrift. That rain of fire and brimstone, often seen as divine fury, is actually like a fiery purifier, cleansing a society that forgot its morals when it wiped out Sodom and Gomorrah. It's not just an opportunity for God to teach a lesson, it's also a real cosmic cleansing. The devastation, rather than just revenge, represents the inescapable consequences of ignoring the values that give life to any human group. It is essential to reflect that razing cities to the ground can be understood as a symbol of the collapse of collective ethics, when a community reaches the point where tyranny and brutality become part of the routine. The image of fire and brimstone indicates that the foundations of a decaying society cannot withstand intense cleansing. When God sends the fire, he is not only drawing attention to himself, but also acting as a judge, dividing the good guys from the bad guys, a theme that reverberates in several stories in the Bible. That flame, which looks more like a pyrotechnic show, may have a much less supernatural root, such as a volcanic explosion or even a meteor paying an unwelcome visit in the vicinity of the Dead Sea. Although this scientific view doesn't erase the spiritual essence of the event, it does expose the way in which the ruin of Sodom and Gomorrah can be seen as a piece of a devastating natural puzzle, where ethics and the natural world dance hand in hand. In the bigger picture, the narrative of Sodom and Gomorrah stands as a warning about the price to be paid when a society forgets the foundations of justice and unity among its members. Annihilation is more than apparent damage. It is a wound to the soul, symbolizing the collapse of a culture that has forgotten its ethical and moral principles. When humanity gives in to corruption, collapse looms, and the only escape from this catastrophic outcome is to revive the values that underpin peaceful coexistence between people. The narrative of Sodom and Gomorrah goes beyond a simple fable of punishment and devastation. It carries a significant weight that echoes today, teaching us about ethics, social equity, and the value of welcoming our neighbors with kindness and compassion, even after the cities have collapsed. The name of these places became a strong icon of sin and depravity, being evoked in various cultures and beliefs as a warning about how indulgence and a lack of morals can ruin a community. However, as well as being a sign of the particular errors of certain places, what was left of Sodom and Gomorrah makes us think about the future of any society that abandons the foundations of morality and justice. After everything ended in ashes, the memories of Sodom and Gomorrah were marked by a complete lack of ethics and solidarity. The legend danced through the ages, sculpting the way people viewed society and the idea of transgression. However, over the years, various thinkers began to see that the ruin of cities was not just a punishment for sexual transgressions, but a mirror that reflected the collapse of a community in defense of the weakest. The disregard for outsiders and the needy was a fateful mistake that caused their downfall. Thus, the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah encompasses more than just sexuality. It penetrates issues of social justice, oppression, and the lack of respect for fundamental human rights, present in various religious traditions, especially Judaism and Christianity. The testimony left behind by Sodom and Gomorrah makes us reflect on how ready we are to swallow injustice, inequality, and evil, and how far we are going to let social problems keep going round and round like popcorn. The scene in which Lot strives to armor the angels, facing the rottenness of his city, can be seen as an example of how to resist, as a moral superhero in a world of villains. He shows us that, even when the world seems to be falling apart, there is always a place for noble gestures and for maintaining the values that make us human. Lot's presence as the only honest person in the story, accompanied by his family, serves as a reminder that even in the midst of the chaos of a society in ruins. Thus, the legacy of Sodom and Gomorrah is not only a sign of the slights of a city that has already disappeared, but also a call for introspection about how our beliefs and actions can sculpt the future of the community. If a Sodom-like society ignores justice, compassion, and the rights of others, it will be doomed, just like those ancient cities recounted in the Bible, to a fate of self-destruction. The precious lesson we can learn from this narrative is the urgency of protecting what is good for everyone, looking after those on the margins and ensuring that our community does not give in to individualism and a lack of compassion, as happened in the biblical cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. The saga of Sodom and Gomorrah is not just a chronicle of ruins, but a rich lesson in the failings of a community that has forgotten its essential foundations. It touches on themes such as justice, ethics, acceptance, and the need to care for those on the margins. The ruin of the cities, with all its theatricality of flames and smoke, is in fact a portrait of the collapse that happens when the pillars of a society are lost because of petty and devastating ambitions. This shows us that it's not just a question of pointing the finger at a specific sin, but of thinking about the bigger picture of the social and spiritual weaknesses that surround us. The inhabitants of these places did not collapse because of a mere slip-up, but because of a lack of zeal in cultivating justice, empathy, and unity. The lack of welcome, the attacks on outsiders and the needy, along with the exploitation of the less favored and brutality against the vulnerable, have painted a dark picture. Here are the mistakes that, according to the story told in the Bible, devastated these cities. This scenario pulls us out of the box, challenging us to see beyond appearances and delve into the richer meaning of this narrative. What lessons are we watering in our garden of values? Are we, as a collective, opening our hearts and doing justice to those who are really at their worst? The narrative of Sodom and Gomorrah makes us reflect on the essence of our own humanity. In the midst of a scenario where social inequalities spread like weeds and the rights of the weakest are often cast aside, are we not flirting with a fate similar to that of the ancient cities in ruins? The report brings a spark of optimism, as Lot and his family have managed to extricate themselves from the devastating chaos. It also opens up a path to recovery and renewal. The narrative doesn't just revolve around the fall of a society in disgrace, but about the chance for transformation, provided that faith and the battle for fairness remain unwavering. It is possible, even in the face of chaos, to fight against darkness, to protect just values and, in the end, to rescue those who long for the light, even when the shadow seems to dominate. From the lessons we learn in these forgotten metropolises, it's clear that ethics and fairness must be the foundation of our attitudes. Ignoring the essential values that guarantee harmonious and fair coexistence can lead us, just like these places, on a journey towards the abyss of self-destruction. It is therefore essential that, as we recall the saga of Sodom and Gomorrah, we seek to cultivate a fairer and warmer planet for all hearts. As we come to the end of this adventure through the lands of Sodom and Gomorrah, we are pushed to reflect on profound dilemmas that are not restricted to the past, but echo in our now. The ruin of these two places, which seems to be a punishment from heaven, turns out to be a mirror of human weaknesses, a community that has turned its back on fairness, kindness, and a warm welcome. The whimsy of Sodom and Gomorrah is not just a finger-pointing at isolated behaviors, but serves as a wake-up call to a society that has turned its back on the rights and needs of the helpless. As we take a walk through this narrative, it's time to evaluate how we are dealing with our neighbors, especially those who are at the mercy of our solidarity. The moral we can draw from Sodom and Gomorrah is clear: a society that turns its back on justice, that puts empathy aside, and that accepts oppression and violence as part of everyday life is on the road to ruin. In a world where social inequalities and injustices are like weeds growing unchecked, it's good to remember that even the smallest act of kindness, that unassuming gesture of help, can be a beacon in the darkness. We can't expect change to come out of nowhere. It needs our hand in the dough. It's essential that each one of us be an example of virtue and justice, making this our everyday life. The saga of Lot and his family also teaches us a lesson. Even in the fiercest storm, redemption is a possibility. Lot's escape from the ruined cities is a symbol of how we can take a step away from the clutches of corruption and seek a more upright and ethical path, no matter how messy the landscape around us. Transformation begins within each of us, in the way we relate to our neighbors and in the principles we decide to nurture in our daily lives. The great wisdom of life is to distribute the coconuts of justice, embrace those in need, and keep the flame of compassion burning, even when the world around us turns into a veritable jigsaw puzzle of chaos. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is, above all, an invitation for each of us to take an active role in creating a better and fairer world. Apply the lessons of Sodom and Gomorrah to your life to ensure that the same fate doesn't befall the societies we form. Let's reflect on these issues together and, most importantly, take action so that the values of justice, hospitality, and solidarity prevail in our world. Before closing, I'd like to extend a special invitation to you. If you enjoyed exploring the true story of Sodom and Gomorrah and the profound lessons it teaches us, be sure to subscribe to our channel, with in-depth analyses and reflections on biblical themes that can transform your way of understanding the scriptures, and, of course, activate the bell to receive notifications whenever a new video goes live so you don't miss any of our upcoming studies. And if you know someone who is also interested in a deeper study of the Bible and the hidden meanings in the sacred stories, share this video with them. We'll be able to grow and exchange ideas about what the Bible has to teach us. We'll spread this knowledge and promote a healthy and enriching debate. So subscribe, activate the bell, and share it with your friends. We'll continue together deepening our understanding of God's Word and its relevance for today's world. See you in the next video, and until then, may the lessons of Sodom and Gomorrah inspire us to be more just, welcoming, and aware of our choices.